Okay, so now I would like to tell you a little bit about Valerie Huff. So Valerie has been loving, growing, and advocating for native plants in the West Kootenay region for more than 2 decades. She's currently leading the Pollination Pathway Climate Adaptation Initiative in the Lower Columbia region with a focus on plant-insect interactions and the fundamental process of pollination. Valerie is a restoration botanist who believes that by paying attention to the missing pieces and processes, we all have the ability to contribute to better biodiversity outcomes for living things. And Valerie's presentation today is entitled Better Biodiversity Outcomes for Native Plants and Insects, Pollination Pathway, Climate Adaptation. So Valerie, thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks, Marcy. And really, this room is so inspiring. It's really exciting to be in this room and all of the collaboration that's going on. So thank you for inviting me. So the Kootenay Native Plant Society is now in its 2nd year of the Pollination Pathway Climate Adaptation Initiative. And as Marcy said, we focus on the relationships between plants and their pollinating insects. Global declines of pollinators have received a lot of attention lately, insect apocalypse, all of that sort of thing, and rightly so. We depend on pollinators for 1 in 3 bites of our food and some of our more interesting foods, and they're also the key to the reproduction of wild plants in our ecosystems, and that's really my focus here today. So pollination itself is an ancient co-evolved mutualism between plants and insects. There are other animals that pollinate. There are also other things that pollinate, but insects are the main pollinators of plants. And so my take is that you cannot protect pollinators without protecting native plant diversity. So going back to a little bit about biodiversity, Greg talked about species diversity. We often think of, this is Biodiversity 101, we also think of the structure of biodiversity. It occurs on 3 levels. Species is our most common one, ecosystems and genes. So from a species perspective, insects are our most diverse group of organisms. In British Columbia, we have more than 500 species of bees, more than 200 species of butterflies, countless beetles, wasps, moths, and flies, which is featured on my cover slide. And this diversity is also matched by plant diversity. And so one of the keystone processes that links all the levels of biodiversity is pollination. And I think of pollination as a keystone process that supports many things in our ecosystem. So pollination is the interaction between plants and insects, results in seeds, but also stability and productivity of our ecosystems, the maintenance of genetic diversity on a landscape, the coevolution which brings the past toward the future of insects and plants, and resilience and adaptation is within that process of pollination. And I believe that by paying attention to pollination, to these relationships, we can get better biodiversity outcomes for all living beings. So the Pollination Pathway team brings together just an incredible diversity of experts in bees and butterflies and botany, the 3 Bs. But we also consult with elders and traditional knowledge holders. We ask school children what they think and what they need, what their needs are. We have so many volunteers, and we have an incredible community of funders. And they all contribute their wisdom and their perspectives to this project. But one of the things that we try to do in this project is bring together the voices that we don't often hear, and that is those of the voices of the pollinators themselves and the plants. And so we think that they bring wisdom to our project. So first we go out into the world and we ask the butterflies some questions. So Janice Arndt and Brenda Beckwith have been working together on 3 of our sites tracking plant plant butterfly interactions. They've documented, last year they documented 49 butterfly species and 160 plant species and numerous interactions between all of those species. And this year they found even more, including a number of listed species. And so they pulled 60 butterflies. So this is a picture of some of the nectar superstars that is coming out of this research. Who are you visiting? Butterfly. But they pulled all these 60 butterflies, and the plant that they prefer is, of course, spreading dogbane. So, having asked the butterflies what plant they like, we think that no restoration project is complete without spreading dogbane. And if someone asks me, well, what should I plant for the butterflies? I'm going to say spreading dogbane, because we ask the butterflies. But from a butterfly perspective, we also ask them, what do your caterpillars eat? Because caterpillars are really fussy eaters, unlike that very hungry caterpillar in that famous children's book that eats pears and apples and all of those things. So many require plants of a single species, genus, or family to lay their eggs on, and each species requires a different plant. So best understood is probably the monarch butterfly, which in our region lays its eggs only on showy milkweed. So without healthy milkweed populations in our landscape, there can be no monarchs. Okay? There are a few other examples of some of the host plants and butterflies. And then we ask the bees and the flowers, what are you doing with each other there? And so this is our graduate student, Rowan Rampton. I get to take credit for all kinds of people's great work, so it's really great. So Rowan has gone into 8 camas meadows across an elevation gradient, and he's documented 148 bee species that are using 96 different flowering species in camas meadows. And each one of these little lines in this very robust network is a single interaction between a plant and a flower. And you can look at these from the perspective of the bees. So here we look at this small carpenter bee. It's a tiny little black bee, and it visits 11 different plants. And you can also interact with these diagrams and look at the plant. So here's camas. And camas alone anchors the network and is visited by 57 species of bees. And that was from his work last year. He's got a whole bunch more this year. So just this incredible network really brings strength and resilience to these communities. And diversity really begets diversity. So if the network links are here, and I really encourage you to explore them, but I wanted to show you, so he's brought down one, so it's just the bumblebee species, or Teptetkeen in Selchen. And this shows how you can actually interact with the diagram itself. You can actually press one and you can say, okay, so Bombus vancouverensis, which flowers did you visit? Or you can go to the other side and say, which bees were visiting camas? Or which bees were visiting the horrible hairy vetch? Yeah, come up to me and I can give you these links, because it's really an interesting way of exploring the incredible network. And the interesting thing about the bumblebees here is that there's almost no overlap between those 2 species. So when people say, well, what should I plant for pollinators? It's like, my answer has to be different if I'm talking about the white-shouldered bumblebee or the Vancouver bumblebee. Right? So it's complexity, diversity, beauty. Okay, so we're also asking the plants. So we've noticed in the West Kootenay that our milkweed populations have been declining and have been suffering from pollination failure for at least 2 decades. They're completely failing to set seed. And so here we have Tiffany Muncaster, who was one of our interns this summer, asking the plants, what's going on with you? Here she's actually trying to hand pollinate the milkweed. But there's a whole bunch of factors that are probably contributing to the lack of pollination in milkweed. It could be that there aren't enough milkweed. It could be that the plant diversity within the milkweed isn't enough. It could be that there aren't enough other flowering plants at the same time as the milkweed. So So it's a complex question, and we're just like beginning to explore it. And then this is Rowan again, and he's hand pollinating camas here. And so he's doing this experiment across an elevation gradient that serves as a proxy for climate change, to see how pollination may succeed or fail for camas into the future as the climate changes. And then we asked the Iqua, the camas, right, love to the roots shirt is all over. And here we have Tana, who's modeled the current distribution, this is a species distribution model for the current climate envelope, and asking, will you be able to survive in the future? And how can we help you do that? And it could be through looking for more appropriate microsites within the current ecosystem. And here she's testing for soil moisture and density. Or it could be by sourcing seed from south of the border. And so as we move forward with this modeling, we'll understand how better to help camas survive in our ecosystems in the future. So Marcy's asked us to reflect on what we've learned through our work and how it brings us resilience moving forward. And I think that this quote from Robin Waldkemper is quite inspiring to me. It's all flourishing is mutual. Like, you can't do native plant conservation without doing native pollinator conservation. But we flourish when they flourish, and they flourish when we flourish. And so, oops. Yeah, so the result of the mutual flourishing between the plants and the pollinators is the seed. And I think that the resilience is in the seed, and that's where I find my personal resilience is through seed collection. And helping these plants and their pollinators move forward into the ecosystems. Yeah, so for better biodiversity outcomes for plants, pollinators, and our ecosystems, and for us, we need these diverse pollination networks, and we need the seeds. The seeds hold the past, and they hold the future. The genes contain that long history of coevolution between plant and insect. The floral tube gets longer on the plant, so the tongue gets longer on the bee. And that coevolution happens over time, and it's continuing to happen, and will continue to happen as the climates change. And it can happen very quickly. So that I take a lot of inspiration from that coevolution and co-adaptation. So there's hope for the adaptation in the future. So, oops. Finally, Marcy asked us to come up with 2 hopeful signs for conservation. Thank you. I tried to avoid this question. So I just wanted to say, I've been really inspired this summer by all the people who are using, and particularly young people who are using community science or citizen science, iNaturalist, Seek, all of these amazing tools that help them look at the natural world in a really different way. It's like I can actually identify this. So it's taken down the barriers, and it's made that it's opened up a whole new window of possibility for interaction and for understanding and for integration with the more than human world. And the second hopeful sign, it's one of those double-edged sword, is the International Union of the Conservation of Nature listed. This is not going. That should be going. It's not playing. I'm sorry, this is a lovely picture of so is the red listing of the monarch butterfly by the IUCN. And this happened 2 weeks after we had found monarch larvae in the lower Columbia region, butterflies and caterpillars on the monarchs, the Padre Valley, and again in Montrose. And it's been a couple of years since we've seen them. And so my hope with the listing is that this really galvanizes action for this iconic butterfly, but also that we start protecting our showy milkweed populations, because you cannot protect the monarch without protecting the showy milkweed. Right. So that's my story. So thanks, Marcy. And also thanks to our funders, partners, and supporters.